to the Cooler Women's Wellness Tribe, the podcast. Get comfortable, get your walking shoes on, and let's get it going. Hello, wealthy women, and welcome to another episode of Women's Wellth. And I'm your guest, Joanne, and I have an amazing guest with me today. I'll introduce her and then I'll pass straight over. So I have Louise here with me, Louise Digby, and she is a UK-based nutritional therapist. I am reading this because she's got so much expertise here. Nutritional therapist, women's holistic weight loss expert, and the founder of the Nourish Method to lasting fat loss. Her clients come to her after struggling to lose weight, despite eating well and working hard to burn the fat. That sounds very familiar. Louise transforms her clients' health and well-being by identifying and addressing each individual's unique needs and imbalances so that they can lose weight, optimize their health, and rediscover their sparkle without restrictive dieting or the need for endless willpower. I love that. I really do. I love all of that, which is why I word for word. So welcome. I'm very excited because I know that a lot of my listeners will be hearing all of that and they will be like, oh my God, that's me. So welcome.
Thank you.
So would you mind just sharing, I always like to just share a little bit of, your background, how you became, this nutritional expert.
Yeah. So, I graduated in 2012 and when I first started practice, I was kind of working with everyone and anyone in terms of things that they had going on, whether it was like IBS or eczema or depression or weight issues. And I found that everyone that came to me, whatever they came to me for, they always wanted to lose weight as well. So I kind of got very familiar with weight loss that way. And then what I also noticed was that the people that came to me for weight loss specifically didn't tend to get as good results as the people that came to me for other health issues in terms of the weight loss side of things. And what that really showed me was that the best way to get good weight loss results is to actually work on your health and well-being and the underlying imbalances, as opposed to just trying to come up with creative ways to eat less and move more. So that's how I kind of ended up focusing on weight loss. And then I really noticed that women, particularly women who are approaching peri-menopause, found it much, much more difficult to lose weight, despite them generally being much more disciplined and dedicated and determined. And so that's why I ended up specialising in that area, because I was kind of determined to find out why that was and, what it is that you can do to address that, and, why it is that the things that you do in your 20s to lose weight doesn't work when you're in your 40s and 50s.
Yeah, I love that. And when you explained it then, it's kind of like really obvious, but no one knows. It's like a bright big pink elephant that no one is looking at in the room. So, and I can think of so many, my clients, friends, having those conversations of, I just can't, I'm doing all of these things, all of the diets. I have a friend who does all of the diets. Like, I'm not, every time I see her, it's a new one where I don't know where she puts them from. And just, if I might put her in touch with you actually, but it is just the weight loss, and it's not, the overarching things. Like, I don't think, and other people as well, they've ever been to have their hormones checked, or, looking at even a mental health, or are there any, where are these imbalances coming from, that every single diet seems to fail you. So it's that kind of the pattern that you see, that it's the focus is in the wrong place.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is that when it comes to weight loss, it's such a multifaceted thing. We've been told that it's this really simple thing of eat less, exercise more, and as long as you're in a calorie deficit, you'll lose weight. But that is not the experience that most people have, particularly for women as they get older. And actually, we need to be thinking about what's going on with your hormones, what's going on with your metabolism, your gut bacteria. Are you inflamed? Do you have deficiencies or intolerances? What about the mindset side of things? Is there self-sabotage happening? And what's your relationship with food like? And also what's the environment that you're in like? Is it going to set you up for success, or are there certain factors or even people that might be getting in your way and stopping you from being able to actualize your goals? So there's all these many things that we need to think about, and actually calories are just a tiny piece of that. And so that's why so many people find it such a challenge to not only lose weight but keep it off, is because they're only looking at the calories aspect of it.
And do you find, as a coach, when you try and broach this subject with your clients, do they resist at first, or are they open? So I know that I've spoken to people and they are insistent on calorie deficit. They don't want to budge. They don't want to know. Do you find that as well?
Yeah, sometimes people come in with a real set way of doing things, and they like to stick with what has worked for them in the past, even if it's not working now. And it can take quite a long time to really break that kind of almost like that crutch of needing to count calories or be in control of how much food they're eating, and help them to see that it's not about how much they're eating, but more about the quality of the food and how they're eating and all the other things that impact the imbalances in their body. And I find for a lot of people, they can kind of embrace this new holistic way of doing things, but as soon as things get a bit stressful in life, or if something throws them off track, often they default back to, oh, I'm just going to eat less. So it's quite hardwired into people because it's what we've been told forever. It's what we've seen other people do to lose weight dramatically. So yeah, it takes some like reconditioning to move away from that permanently.
Where do you think that that comes from? So, women in their 30s, 40s, where does this, and it is a conditioning, but where do you think it stems from that we just think, right, I'll just stop eating the dust diet, I like to call it, when they're calorie counting on, what is it, My Fitness Pal? Oh my God, it's like saying you need to eat 800 calories a day. Like where does this mindset come from, do you think?
I think it comes from lots of places. It's what we're taught in school. I remember being taught, possibly I did PE, and I think they taught us about it in that. And I think it's what you see in all the magazines when you're growing up, all the trendy diets that the magazines push. Whenever you see someone who has lost a dramatic amount of weight, a celebrity or someone, it's usually through some sort of restrictive approach as opposed to like a health focused approach. And then you've got shows like The Biggest Loser, which take it to the extreme where people are, doing crazy amounts of exercise and really restricting their diet. So yeah, we see it all over the place. And, when it's enforced as strictly as it is on things like The Biggest Loser, then yeah, it works, but it's not sustainable. And, when they follow up with those people, the weight just goes back on, often more of it.
Yeah, exactly. And, they've got all the support around them. As you were talking then as well, I was thinking about, like, it is like fighting the losing battle, because can you remember when Kim Kardashian was all in the news for squeezing into that dress, the Marilyn Monroe dress? And I remember at the time thinking, they're looking at this from the wrong angle. Like, there was only a few newspaper reports or whatever I saw on the internet that actually spoke about drinking whatever she was drinking. Was it pepper and lemon juice for weeks?
Oh, I can't remember.
Well, it was something ridiculous, and everyone was like jumping on the diet, and I was like, hang on a minute, this is why the diet world, the health fitness, and this is why coaches and people struggle so much, because we're being told you can fit in this Marilyn Monroe dress if you drink just water for 2 weeks. So push them aside. What would you say then? So if someone's listening to this and they, that light bulb moment's just happened with them and they are that person, all of the diets, and they've never actually looked, internally elsewhere. Where do you start? What's your advice?
I think the first thing to do is to start paying attention to what your body is telling you, because usually there's a lot more going on than just weight loss resistance. There might be things like fatigue or poor sleep, or signs in your skin like dry skin or acne, or maybe it's premature aging. Could be dry, brittle hair, brittle nails, achy joints. Anything that's kind of, out of the norm should be paid attention to, because it's a sign from your body that something isn't right. We put a lot of things down to aging, like achy joints, for example, or not being able to sleep as well. But actually, those things are happening for a reason. Usually, it's not just a case of your body is wearing out. There's usually more to it than that. And those things are so often linked in with the imbalances that are causing the stubborn weight. If you've got a lot of inflammation in your body, for example, then that might be something that's causing your joint pain, sleep issues, mood issues, hormonal problems, and stubborn weight as well. So if we start paying attention to what our body's telling us, which can take a little bit of practice, because we tend to tune these things out and we tend to brush them off as normal. But once we start paying attention, then we can start looking for patterns in our symptoms, and that might give us some insights into what actually we need to focus on. Do we have deficiencies? Is it our guts that need the attention? And then really, I think a good place to start is to just start thinking about what can you add into your diet to nourish your body, as opposed to the typical diet approach, which is to start cutting stuff out. Let's start adding stuff in. What's missing? What nutrients can we add in? Are there any vegetables that are a certain colour that you don't get a lot of in your diet? Let's get a rainbow of fruits and vegetables in the diet to start with. Let's get lots of fibre in the diet. Make sure we're having enough protein. That's really a good place to start to get a solid foundation in place. And, in many cases, that can be enough to just make a world of difference to how you feel and sleep and the progress on the scales. And sometimes we need to go a little bit further and build on that, but that's certainly the best place to start.
Yeah, I love that. And just the message of not taking out, but what can you put in? And I'm sure you find this as well. The more people think about what they're putting in, the less they put in the bad stuff. So say their diet before was, fatty, processed. As soon as you start having that mind switch of, okay, I don't know, you might be having a burger, but you've put spinach on the side now, starting small. And eventually the mindset does just naturally shift to, oh, I don't want that processed meat or whatever it is. You start to naturally make those changes. And do you think that's because we start to make that mind, body, gut connection, that we're more mindful, it's more mindful eating?
Definitely. Eating mindfully is absolutely key. And when you start thinking about adding in the good stuff, you basically crowd out the not so good stuff. And because whole food is so much more filling and satisfying, then you actually end up eating less when you start thinking about adding in more of the whole foods, the good stuff.
Yeah, it's such a good message. So don't take out, put in. So for later, what lady comes to you and, complete blank slate. She's never, I have friends who just don't do fruit, don't do vegetables. And to me, it's like, what? But you don't. And, I sometimes, they'll ask me like, what do you have for your breakfast? So I'll tell them and they're like, oh my God, what's your fate? So if you've got one of those ladies that's just like, right, I've been dieting for the past 10 years, just getting bigger, I'm unhealthy, I'm aching. And then, she's telling me that she's having, what could be a really bad breakfast? Fried egg on white bread. What I wouldn't eat. Where would you start with her? Because I know that's a really big, the hardest client you can have. But what would your baby steps be with her diet? What would you suggest? Let's stick to breakfast, because I think that's the big thing for people, isn't it? Because a lot of people just skip or they go for sugar.
Yeah, definitely. And breakfast is always where I start, because if you can set yourself up for a really good day with a solid breakfast, then you're going to have fewer cravings, you're not going to be as hungry, and it's going to be easier to make good food choices later on in the day, and also not have the slumps in your energy and your concentration as well. So yeah, getting breakfast right is really good. Eggs in themselves aren't a bad option. It's more about the white bread that that example has in it. Because the main thing that we want in our breakfast is plenty of protein.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure it's protein rich and that we've got some fat in there and we've got some fiber in there. So that could look like some eggs and some stir-fried veg and a bit of avocado. Or it could look like a homemade granola, which is my go-to, because you can make up a big batch at the weekend and then you can eat it for a week or 2 weeks, depending on how much you make. And that could have things in like coconut and flaked almonds and nuts and seeds. Mix it up with some almond butter and roast it, and you've got yourself a lovely granola. And that ticks all the boxes because it's got lots of protein, lots of fat, lots of fiber, and it's really filling as well. So those are a couple of good options for breakfast, and that'll keep you full up for quite a while. So that is definitely the place to start for breakfast.
Yeah, and for the granola, I know the answer, but just why would we bother making our own when we can go to the supermarket?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are one or two okay brands in some supermarkets, but other than that, the vast majority of granolas or cereals or whatever are loaded with sugar and very processed. Have all sorts of additives in, and they just do not make you feel good. They don't keep you full. They're very inflammatory. Completely devoid of protein. Even when they've got protein kind of stamped on the box, it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment. But when a company adds that to their box, yeah, it might have protein in, but it doesn't mean that it's actually got a lot of protein in it. And if it does have it in it, it's probably a really processed form of protein. So making your own granola means that you know what's in it, and you can control the proportions of things that are in it. You can add some oats if you want to. You could add a bit of honey, but at least you know how much is in there. Whereas the shop bought ones, the amount of sugar is just outrageous.
Yeah. And I'm sure that you come faced with this all the time, that people do generally believe that the bars, is it Nature's Valley? That's the one that came to my mind. And the cereal bars, the ones, and they literally say healthy, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
You think that, okay, I haven't got time for breakfast, so I'm going to reach for one of these healthy cereal bars. If you're coaching someone and, they're flipping it over, what are the things that they need to be looking for in the label? So if they're reaching for these things for breakfast in the morning, if they are in a rush, what would you say, put it down if they picked it up in the shop, if they turned over and looked at the label?
When it comes to those breakfast bar, cereal bar type things, I'm yet to find one that is actually a good option. They are even worse than cereal. They're extremely high in sugar, partly because they need the sugar to stick it all together. So it's not often that I say don't eat something altogether, but there's plenty of good alternatives to having something like a cereal bar. So I would avoid those. But in terms of what you're looking at on labels, the first thing that I would look at is the ingredients list, because if it's got a long ingredients list, then that's not a good sign. It's a sign that it's very processed. if there's ingredients on there that you don't recognize as food or are unpronounceable, then that's also a sign that it's quite processed. If sugar is the first, second, or even third ingredient, then it means that there's a lot of sugar in there. The ingredients are in the order of kind of the amount that there is. So the first ingredient is the thing that makes up the majority of that food, if that makes sense. So yeah, if sugar is the first, second, or third ingredient, then I would avoid. So they're the main things that you want to look at on the ingredients list. And then you can start looking at the nutrition table, but it kind of depends on what it is and how it's being consumed. You know, is it a snack, a meal, or just a little treat, as to what you're looking for on the nutrition table.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I know that just for my own, checking labels on things, there's so many foods, I can't think that what you expect to be first isn't first. And, if you're not looking and you just take it for granted that this is what's in this. I can't remember what I picked up the other day, but I can't remember. And that was like the third thing down. I was like, absolutely not. It might have been something, it might have been for the dogs, actually. It might have been the meat was like third or fourth, and even for the dogs, just checking that, because they need to eat healthily as well. And I think it was, I picked something up for them, and the meat content was actually one of the last things. I was like, no, they're not, and just having that knowledge, and it's 2 seconds, just checking and look for an alternative. Like I say, make your own. What role then? So as we're talking about women reaching, peri-menopause or into the menopause, and no one sits us down at any age, really. Although we get the period talk before we're teenagers, and then that's it. Then it's off you go into the wide world. And then as soon as you hit a certain age, then people start talking about menopause, but there isn't that talk. I don't think my mum's going to call me up soon and say, "Oh, let's have this talk." It doesn't happen. And it's kind of like you learn from, obviously we're lucky we've learned about it. But if you don't become a coach, it's like you just learn from what you hear, the news, and it's not all good what you hear, out there. It is getting better. So what role, just for listeners, like you said at the start, so I'm explaining this in a very long way. When we're 20, we lose weight in a certain way. And when we're 40, 35, it starts to change. So what role do our hormones play in that?
So really from around the age of about 35 to late 40s, depending on the individual, your hormones are starting to change as you approach menopause, which is typically about 50, 51. And we kind of assume that, menopause happens in your late 40s, 50s, and that's all we really get told about it. And we don't get told that actually that gradual shift in your hormones starts from as early as 35. Sometimes it may even start earlier. And so really from that point, your body's needs are starting to change, because what's actually happening is your ovaries are starting to produce less estrogen and progesterone, and your adrenals, which are your stress glands, they are starting to take over some of the production of those sex hormones, until eventually your ovaries stop producing altogether, and that's when menopause actually happens. And your adrenals take over to a certain extent. And what that means is that your body is much less resilient to the effects of stress, and whether that is stress that's emotional stress, or whether it's physical stress in the form of undereating, over-exercising, pain, sleep deprivation. They're all things that are very stressful for your body, and your body just can't cope with it as well when you're perimenopausal and after menopause, because you're no longer producing your sex hormones from your ovaries. It's starting to come from your adrenals, but your adrenals also have to produce your stress hormones. So the priority for your body is to be able to respond to stress, not to be able to reproduce. So your body's always going to prioritize making stress hormones over sex hormones. So what that means is that just normal modern life is quite stressful, quite demanding on our bodies. And that means that you're going to be more prone to your hormones going too low or going out of balance during this phase of peri-menopause, or really after the age of 35-ish. So that's one of the reasons why it can become more challenging to lose weight, to kind of get your hormones feeling like they're balanced after that time. And then if you add to that, that also from around the age of 35, your metabolism starts to slow down. You know, if we're not making an effort to maintain our muscle mass, then we start to lose it gradually. And your muscle is metabolically active. So the less muscle you have, the fewer calories you burn at rest. And so the more likely it is that you're going to start to put on some weight or struggle to lose weight. So it's a bit of a double whammy, particularly for women.
It is. And I think just having that understanding though of, right, okay, this is where I'm at, and just the knowledge of I need to start changing things now. And I know for me, I used to be a vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
And when I reached, I'd probably say over the past few years now, just from listening to my body, now I'd say I'm more of a flexitarian. There's still certain things that I don't eat because just the animal. But introducing that, and I've noticed a huge difference in just my energy levels. I really felt that my energy levels started to dip, but just understanding like, right, what is going on here, and introducing meat. So I just started with chicken. I started with fish, started with chicken, and now we have steak in the fridge now for the first time in, I don't know. I feel weird about it, but I'm going to do it because I know that my body needs it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I'm craving it. So mm-hmm. my body's like, hello, and I'm thinking about meat.
Yeah.
And not ignoring that, but I know not to ignore it. So if my body's saying, go and, I don't know, just think, even this morning when I left the gym, I obviously needed protein. And when I went into the supermarket, I just went to the meat aisle and I was like, shall I buy a piece of steak and just cook it when I get home? I didn't. I had sardines instead because I'm still a bit, but just that urge. And I have spoken to other women who, completely vegan, like strict vegan, who've also done very similar because their bodies, they were just craving it. And, learning that, yes, okay, it could be a beautiful thing to be vegan, vegetarian, depending on why your choices are, but the main thing is you're listening to your body. And, because we want to make this change in the hormones as easy as possible. Like I said, my energy levels now, I don't notice any difference. I have energy. I'm not napping in the afternoons. Like a few years ago, I was just tired all of the time. Like I could literally go to bed in the afternoon. Like I would sit on the toilet at work and just put my head in my hands, and like literally I could fall asleep now. But the only reason I couldn't was because I was sat on a toilet. Mm-hmm. So what would your advice be as a nutritional expert to somebody, who has had restrictive diets, whether it be vegan, vegetarian, or just those restrictive diets because they're scared to put on weight? Mm-hmm. What's your advice to those women as they approach this age?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just going back to what you were saying as well, is important to listen to your body because it's really good at telling you what it needs. If your body's telling you to eat junk, then okay, maybe don't listen to that so much. But if it's telling you that it needs meat, or if you're getting cravings for salt, then those are both things that we can need or we can lack, even though we can get protein elsewhere. Actually, there's other things in meat that we can't get from plants, and even if you supplement them, it can still be difficult for your body to get the nutrients in the right form. And for some people, there are genetic variants that mean that, for example, vitamin A is a classic one. You can't extract the beta carotene from plants, and instead you have to get it in this vitamin A form, in its retinol form, from meats, or supplement in that correct form. So, that can be one of the reasons why you might crave a specific type of meat, for example. So yeah, it's important to listen to your body, because it's probably telling you something that you're lacking. But also, I think as you progress into this perimenopausal phase, your needs change. And I was talking about how you become less resilient to stress and how your hormones are changing. And so, rather than what worked before, cutting back and exercising more, instead we want to think about doing movement that builds strength and flexibility and mobility, as opposed to the workout that does the highest calorie burn. And we want to be focusing on supporting our bodies through stress and managing stress, and making sure we're getting enough nutrients to nourish our bodies through stress as a priority, making sure we get enough sleep as a priority, again, rather than getting up an hour earlier to do a workout. Yeah. So making sure that we're focusing more on just kind of being a bit more caring towards our bodies and taking a more nourishing approach with our food is going to serve you a lot better than the typical restrictive diets and intense workouts.
Yeah, I feel like the restrictive diet and the high cardio is a phase that every woman goes through. And it's one of those phases that can last. And just like you said, you then hold on to that because that's what you feel is your thing, that you run and you don't eat much, but your body is probably screaming out for, like, we need more. And it's having that, allowing yourself to tune in, because your body is your best friend. And, like your best friend telling you, like, listen, maybe you should try eating X, Y, Z. If your best friend told you, you'd probably listen. So we tend to ignore our bodies. And that's the way that I see it. So I'm like, right, what do you want? But like you said, if she's telling me to, like, there's marshmallows in the fridge. We had a fire the other night, and, the part of me that's like, go on, just eat those marshmallows. But like, now I have this relationship with my body is, I'm not restricting myself, but I don't need that sugar right now. Like, it's not, I don't need it. And I'm happy with the relationship that I have now, whereas, I can have them, I can leave them, even though they're knocking on the door. And, finding that middle where you are happy and you can say no, because you know that you can have them at another time. I did have another question for you then. Ladies who have been on these, restrictive diets, especially if they're like 35, 40, because we grew up with Kate Moss, the weight. I was actually chatting yesterday, may have been, what was I recording? But I remember, and you probably remember saying, now if someone says, does my bum look big in this? You want the answer to be yes, like, you ask, does my bum look big? And you want a yes. I remember growing up, and the joke was never, ever, it was to the men, does my bum look big in this? And there'd be sketch shows. Never say yes if your wife asks you this, because it was, wave look that we all had to, no bum, no boobs. And then the early 2000s, the six pack, the low jeans, and all of that was obviously achieved through very restrictive diets. How do you help women to sort of come out of that mindset? Because it's 20 years of don't eat that, like I say, the dust diet. How do you ease women out of that without them having a freak out because, they're having to eat more than they think they should?
I think the key thing for a lot of women to realize is that actually we should have a slightly higher body fat percentage than those women had back in the 90s and noughties, and even what you see now, a lot of celebrities. I was watching Selling Sunset a few years ago, and they are all so stick thin, and a lot of them are in their 40s, and it's just so unattainable for your average woman. They've got personal trainers, and I don't know what they're doing, but there's very, very little fat on them. But actually, we need to have some fat on us, because that fat helps us to make estrogen. We actually make some estrogen from our fat cells. So it's normal to have a little bit more fat on you as you come towards the end of your peri-menopause. That doesn't mean that, you should expect to be overweight, but it's normal to be bigger than you were in your 20s. So I often have a fairly lengthy conversation with my clients to help them to understand that they shouldn't be aiming for what they were in their 20s, and that would actually be unhealthy for them to have a six pack, because to have a six pack, you've got to have a really low body fat percentage, and that's not going to be good. But in terms of helping people to shift their mindsets towards food, I always try and get people to look at food on like a scale of how nourishing it is. And rather than looking at foods as good or bad or fattening or slimming, instead looking at food as a source of nutrients, and trying to choose foods based on what it's going to give us, as opposed to trying to say, oh well, I'm not going to eat that because it's fattening, because there's really no such thing as food that's bad, because all food has some sort of value to it. All food has something that is going to give us, even the most processed food. If that was all that was available and you were starving, then that's good. It's going to keep you going. It's going to keep you alive. And even the most kind of healthiest food that you can think of, if that's all you have, then that's not going to do you good either. So it's about having a balance of all these different foods, and not trying to cut out things altogether.
Yeah. And I read something somewhere, and I think it was either 90-year-old women giving advice, or one of those advice from the deathbed. And one of those was basically what you've just said about, eat the cake, because it's going to give you what you need at that time, because we don't want to eat it every day. And it was a lovely quote. I wish I could make, do it as well as she did. But that really hit with me as well. And the writing underneath it as well was, no one ever sits on their deathbed saying, thank God I didn't eat the cake as well. And even that, like, gosh. And I know some people personally, some women personally, who have been on a diet for as long as I've known them, and it's probably 20 years, and they've always been watching what they eat, and it's their life. And when I read that quote, it just made me so sad to think there are millions of women out there that have just grown up with something in their heads that they're always watching what they eat. As women, we've all been there as well. When you go out for food and you want dessert, and they come with the dessert menu, and everyone looks at each other and everyone wants it, but no one wants to see. It's like that dead silence. And then as soon as one person, and I'm going to use the word courage, because they will go, oh yes, and then everyone has it. And even that, gosh, the amount of times I've been out and I can see friends just being so careful with the menu, and taking certain things off, not having the fries, not having the potato. And this is a lifetime of dieting. It's literally how women spend their life, isn't it? Just being so careful, and it really upsets me. And so like you there to help them through. How important is it that we, as women, when again reaching 30, 35, 40, that we do pay more attention to what we're eating in regard to health of our bones? This is one thing that's always been, when I've visited the doctors, when I used to be on birth control, it was always the warning that they gave me, because I've always been on the slight side. And this has been kind of drilled into me for a very long time, that I came off birth control because I was, the BMI was low, and I had to look after my bones. So it's always been a thing on my mind. How important is that?
Yeah, it's really important. And it's never too early to start thinking about your bone health. But as you get towards menopause, it's even more important because the drop in estrogen is something that can really affect your bone health. And estrogen is very protective of your bones. So, that's why it becomes more important at that time. Um, and, for a lot of people, they think looking after their bones means taking a calcium supplement or drinking lots of milk. But actually, that is a very debatable thing. Taking calcium supplements is a bit of a contentious subject because too much calcium on its own can actually be unhealthy. But one of the most important things that you can do for your bones is strength training and, impact workouts. The impact of a workout helps to build bone strength, and then keeping your muscles strong around your bones helps to protect them and to protect your joints as well. Making sure that you've got plenty of vitamin D. That's one of the biggest things. And it's usually a good idea to take that with vitamin K, because again, K is very important for your bones. And magnesium, so many of us are low in it because it's just something that gets depleted by modern life. Stress depletes it, coffee depletes it, exercise depletes it. So making sure you've got plenty of magnesium is going to be helpful for your bones, but also for hormones and sleep and stress and pretty much everything. So those are three nutrients that are really key and can be quite tricky to get in your diet. So it can be a good idea to start thinking about a supplement that has all of those things in to protect your bones, but also there's lots of other things that they do in your body as well.
Yeah, and it is. I have magnesium, and actually that's why I had sardines today, because I was thinking my vitamin D, even though I live in the sunshine and you can get it in the sunshine, it is on my mind. And, just to other women out there who, when you learn these things about your body, treating it as that you're working with your body. It's not something that, it's a chore, because I speak to a lot of people as well. And, I'll say that, oh, I eat this for this because, when I was 25, I was told that my vitamin D was low and I could be at high risk of osteoporosis. And I am actually glad that they told me that then. And I came off birth control and I started to learn then. So I guess I'm lucky in that case. But then a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know how you can be bothered. And, whether they're scared of it. I'm just like, no, it's working with, I want to keep myself, it's longevity. It's very sustainable once you get into the habit of doing that, So reaching for some oily fish, or what else do I have for vitamin D? Trying to get outside for 20 minutes, but that's not always easy, especially when you live in the UK. I know it's been snowing.
Yeah, it's actually -6 today here, and so yeah, getting outside and it isn't easy. And also at this time of year, we're just not going to make any vitamin D from the sun.
Yes.
But even in the peak of summer, you've got to be out in it in kind of the middle hours of the day for at least 20 minutes with no sun cream on, with a fair amount of your body exposed to the sun to be able to get close to making what you need. And for a lot of people, that just isn't achievable. So in many cases, taking a vitamin C supplement year round is really essential.
Yeah, it is. It is important. Yeah, my vitamin D has always been borderline. So it was okay last time I had a blood test, but I am very aware vitamin D and iron, but anemia runs in my family, so I'm guessing that's why. Okay, amazing. So if you could just leave the listeners today with one last message, you could wave your magic wand. What would that be?
Ooh,
I know it's on the spot, but
I think it would be to try and eat as clean as possible in terms of real food. There's more and more ultra processed food that is being branded as healthy, particularly a lot of plant-based food or vegan kind of meat alternatives. It's so processed, and a lot of people are adding these things into their diet because they think that they're a healthy option. But actually, what more and more research is showing is that ultra-processed food and the ultra-processed ingredients are, not doing us any good, can drive weight gain, are really addictive. So if you're finding that you can't kind of satisfy your hunger, whatever you do, or even when you do feel full, you still want to keep eating, look at what you're eating, because it might be that you're eating quite processed stuff, which is, kind of makes our brain crave it even when we really, really don't need it.
Yeah. And I actually fell in that trap personally. I would say maybe it was before I lived in Dubai and I was still a vegetarian. So 8 years ago, 9 years ago, all I ate was Linda McCartney, the corn stuff. And I thought I was healthy. I thought I was doing the right thing. And when I look at pictures of myself from then and now, I look younger now. I used to have, my skin was grey, dark circles, my bones, my collar. I shared a picture on Instagram, and I have skinny arms anyway. I do have noodle arms, but they were ridiculous. And this was me thinking that I was healthy because I was a vegetarian and I was eating all of these, vegetarian foods, thinking I was getting protein, and it really, my periods were all over the place. They were heavy. I was pale, grey, sick. So I fell into that trap. Yes, it's a very easy trap to fall into. So before we go, how can my listeners work with you? If you've got any offers at the moment, share away.
Well, I have my own podcast, which is called The Thriving Metabolism. So you can find that by searching on any podcast platform or on YouTube. And if you want to find out more about what I do, you can go to louisedigbynutrition.com, or you can find me on Facebook and Instagram by searching at Louise Digby Nutrition. And then I also regularly run a 5-day challenge, which is all about getting the foundations in place and really doing a lot of the things that we've spoken about today in terms of working to get your hormones balanced, your building up your metabolism and repairing it, and getting a little bit deeper than just looking at what you're eating. So the details of that will be on my website as well, and I can give you the direct link to put on your show notes if you like.
Yes, amazing. Yeah, everything will be in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much. I feel like I've learned a lot as well today and been reminded of some things. I feel like sometimes you do need that reminder, because it is easy to slip into bad habits and forget things. Yeah, thank you so much for joining. And yeah, thank you very much everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and yes, please reach out to Louise. All her information will be in the show notes. And I will see everybody next week.
And that's it today, everybody. I hope you have a lovely week, and I'll see you again next week. Don't forget, 5 stars, download, tell your friends. You're amazing.